So it seems Zimbabwe has seasonal roads. How do you intend on improving needed road repairs? Faster repair crew deployment, or do you have another alternative?
Regarding the infrastructure in this country, it is important to identify companies that can do a good job. For example, regarding road repair, we intend to put out bids and identify companies that have a history.
Hello, my name is Kudzai Muzarewa, and I am sitting here with Reverend Dr. Gunyai Muzarewa, who is planning to run for the office of president in the 2023 Zimbabwean elections. Dr. Muzarewa, can you tell the audience why you feel you are the most suited and best qualified candidate for the presidency?
Thank you, Kudzai. I feel that leadership is critical, and I feel that I have what it takes to be the leader for this country. I have international exposure that has connected me with the several systems of government, several ways of doing things, and that exposure brings Zimbabwe into focus as well. Now, having seen what's going on around here today, I know that come to the conclusion that what I have, the experience that I have accrued is most suitable for this leadership position. For example, I was involved in the liberation war by way of recruiting and advising and supporting the young people who went out to prepare for this liberation war. I have that feeling when they left, feeling that when they come back, these young people will live a good life. And when I see that that is not happening, I get concerned. Did we lie to these young people? No. We got to deliver what we promised to them. And what did we promise them? That Zimbabwe would be the most ideal country for us in Southern Africa. Because that is not happening, I know that if I go into this position of president, I will make sure that that will happen. What we promised them will happen. I also believe that my understanding of servant leadership makes me unique in this position. I believe that I'm not doing this for me, I'm doing this for Zimbabwe. I'm not doing this just because, I'm doing this because there is a serious need. A lot of people have said there's vacuum leadership in Zimbabwe, and I am feeling that vacuum. I also believe that my approach to leadership, which includes inclusive leadership, is also very unique and very special in this situation. We want to include as many people, gifted people as possible in this leadership. And so the people that I see around don't seem to believe that, and I strongly believe that leadership should take into consideration utilization of talent within the country. Whether those people belong to my party or not does not matter. First thing, they belong to Zimbabwe. So we want them to have that opportunity. Finally, some people may share all these other things, but the very unique thing that I know about myself is my integrity. That makes me the most suitable candidate for this position.
There are many political parties in Zimbabwe, all of which hoping to win the election. Do you see all the opposition parties uniting in order to unseat the incumbent?
Yes, there are many political parties, that is true, but I'm sorry to say that we also know that some of them, maybe even most of them, projects planted by the government to destabilize or to confuse issues, because these are people who would seem to be on the opposition side, but in fact they are there to just give us a false appearance. So there are some that are not really genuine opposition parties, but the few that are genuine, the few that really intend to unseat the government are respected and appreciated. We actually intend to join hands with those that are genuine in their focus on unseating the current government. We will join with them when time comes. But right now, as a political party, we are building our numbers. We are present on every province in Zimbabwe. and we are building our numbers so that if we need to join with other parties, we will do that. It is the most ideal thing to do, actually, because if we are all planning to bring better government, then we should really unite and have that as a common goal. By the way, talking about projects, I got to go back to that. Talking about projects, most people who know their history of Zimbabwe are aware that the UANC is the most original political party in this country in terms of majority rule, because the UANC formed in the mid-70s, and actually in 1979 they formed government for 6 months. The reason that government did not last is because the leader of that party, Bishop Muzorewa, believed that as long as some people were outside the country, like the freedom fighters were still outside the country, he said he didn't feel that Zimbabwe was at its fullest. So he did everything possible to bring in those who were outside the country. This is what led to the Lancaster House Conference, where all the leaders, all the stakeholders, including the British, the Zanla and the Zipra leaders and so forth, they all got together the final ceasefire. This is
next question is, what are your thoughts on legalizing marriages between citizens of the same gender?
Unity. I believe that all parties that are really committed to real change should see it fit to unite for a common goal and a common cause.
Okay. What do you believe to be the main problem you intend to solve in this nation, and how do you intend to solve it?
The problem in Zimbabwe is really like a web. You cannot point at one thing, because one thing kind of like a domino, one thing leads to another. But I can say economy, ideology, lack of rule of law, and corruption. Those four make one point. If this country had maintained the rule of law, it seems to me that there wouldn't be as much commotion as there has been the last few decades. But the rule of law was neglected because of ZANU-PF ideology. ZANU-PF ideology also contributed to the problem that we have today. Economic problem, because the ideology of ZANU-PF has led to some economic policies that have really ruined the economic structure of this country. And so that's why I say it's a mix of things, but everything now is boiled down to the economy as the main problem. So my intention is to create a political atmosphere that is conducive to good business, to an atmosphere of investment, an atmosphere of business growth, to an atmosphere of just peace, unity, and prosperity. I'm looking at bringing the rule of law, because that is number one. When people know that there is a rule of law in this country, they know that whatever they invest is covered, and there is a law that protects, and there is a recourse if you should be in a legal wrangle. Right now, there's no such thing, because everybody is their own boss.
In the last several months, there have been strikes in what appears like endless negotiations regarding teachers, nurses, and doctors' salaries and packages. If this continues into your administration, how do you propose to solve this?
Assuming that 2023 is going to see me in power, I can tell you that the first thing that we will have to attend to is the whole idea of civil servants' salaries. In any country, civil servant salaries are well established. Parliament passes the law, and once that is done, everything follows. Now, in this country, it seems to me that the Minister of Finance seems to make some decisions about salaries, about packages for civil servants. It doesn't work like that. It must be passed by Parliament, that this is what civil servants will make. There will be grades for that, for salaries and so forth. And so the civil servants need to be assured that government is their employer, has their interest at heart. I've heard President Mnangagwa say that he's building this economy so that 2030 there will be middle class in Zimbabwe. This is not leading us to middle class at all, because if civil servants are poorly paid the way they are, they are not going to build, there's no way they're going to build the middle class. If civil servants are paid for whatever they do by being allowed to import cars, that doesn't build a middle class. So in my administration, I can assure you that we won't even need strikes. We won't have to attend to or deal with the strikes, because we will just have all the stakeholders concerned and consulted, and the salaries are set, and the parliament endorses, and we move on. It is always very important that civil servants are happy, because they are the machinery of the government. If these people are not happy, how can you expect them to work efficiently? The worst thing you want to do with your employees is to disappoint them every month, to disappoint them every day, because you don't pay them. In Zimbabwe right now, the other serious problem that I have already a plan to solve is the problem of currency. We must have a stable currency. We will have a stable currency, and we have that in the works. And so with a stable currency, our business will be good, our salaries will be meaningful to the people, and we won't have to worry about giving them extra packages in lieu of salary. I just believe, let's pay them their legitimate salary, and they'll do whatever they want with it.
Can you tell us something about your foreign policy?
Foreign policy is always a tricky thing, but to put it simply, first of all, Zimbabwe must be a non-aligned state. That doesn't mean that we don't have friends. We make friends. And it doesn't mean that we will be like isolated. No, we will have friends that we trade with. But my philosophy always is that whether it's east or west or south, we should be a sovereign state. We should be able to make our own decisions. We should decide who to trade with and who not to trade with. We should also decide whether to be members of a member of the Commonwealth or a member of NATO or the UN. All these things as a sovereign state. We ought to make those decisions. And so it follows that our foreign policy is guided by the principle of win-win. I will never allow my country to be exploited by other countries for whatever reason. That I will fight against until we win. The belief is win-win is the best policy.
Okay. What are your thoughts about Zimbabwe's diaspora community? Specifically, what would you do as president vis-a-vis the diasporans?
I'm very concerned about the people, about Zimbabweans who are in the diaspora. Myself, I work in the United States because I was unable to find a job in this country. I have the highest degree of education. There are institutions here, but the way people are hired is such that if you happen to not belong to ZANU-PF, then it's difficult to get a job in this country. Now, so one thing I'm going to do about the diasporic community is to make sure that Zimbabwe works under the rule of law. We have rule of law. Rule of law says if there's any injustices done, someone can appeal to the courts and so forth. So I'm saying all this to say that the diasporic community are there because they cannot work here. So we should create conditions of work in this country. We should create conditions of businesses in this country. We should make Zimbabwe great. We should make Zimbabwe a country to go to. We should not make Zimbabwe a country to run away from. So the people who are in the diaspora, if they are looking for opportunities there to do business, we want to make Zimbabwe just as good a match as whatever they have out there. But they are out there because out there, for the most part, there is the rule of law. They are out there because for the most part, there is order, there's a stable currency, and so forth. So these are the things that I will put in place. A stable currency, rule of
voting is a
law
waste of time,
and the
as
fact
the
that
election result is
Zimbabwe,
already
when we say Zimbabwe is open for business, we are not talking about bringing in foreigners only. We're talking of making Zimbabweans, native Zimbabweans, comfortable doing business in their own country.
What are some of the policies you intend to implement in order to curb corruption in Zimbabwe?
Zimbabwe has had a bad situation for the last 2 decades because there are a lot of people who try so many things. Now, one of the solutions that I have is to computerize all government offices throughout the country. Once we computerize this, we hope there's going to be a method of follow-up, the method of auditing. There's going to be a method of doing business that can help us to curb corruption. I know that even the computer can be tampered with, but you know what? It's better than a pencil. A pencil is the easiest thing to tamper with. You can even erase what you have written. So computerizing all government offices is one way to curb corruption. Anyone who comes to a government office and they want, say, a birth certificate, they don't have to bribe whoever is helping them, because if the computer says the thing has been accepted, application has been accepted, it's complete, the computer should tell us when the project will be available, when the product will be available. And also, I can tell you this, Kodai, that the first thing I will do in government is to eradicate the Anti-Corruption Commission, because that is a joke. I have a better idea to deal with that whole concept of anti-corruption. I am going to make it known that every government office has a certain number, emergency number. Anyone who senses that they are being treated in an unfair way, anyone who feels that the clerk is soliciting bribes and so forth, can call that hotline. Once that hotline is called, everything stops right there and the investigation begins right there, and then the person is taken to court, and if they are found guilty, then they find themselves behind the bars. That is a better anti-corruption measure than the Anti-Corruption Commission that we have in Zimbabwe today. For example, we have read information that some of the members of the Anti-Corruption Commission, they themselves are corrupt. So that's why I say it's a joke. So I'm not going to work with that. I want to say every Zimbabwean is an Anti-Corruption Commission member, in the sense that they can turn in anyone who's acting in a corrupt manner. Anti-corruption has made many people poor in Zimbabwe. So we really want to be faithful about this and work towards transparency and work towards faithfulness and so forth, so that country may rise to a better level. Corruption has really made Zimbabwe poorer than it ought to be, or than it has been ever. So we mean to stop that. It's everyone's concern. Everyone must know that one of the worst enemies is corruption.
Okay. In 30 seconds, what would you like to share with the people of Zimbabwe about your leadership or candidacy?
People of Zimbabwe need to know that growing up, I never was interested in politics. But I thought that I would be just a technocrat and do my work to make my contribution to my nation. But when it became apparent that the people at the top are not leading the country in the right direction, the people at the top have other agendas, the people at the top are looking after themselves more than the nation. That's when the calling came to me, and I call it a calling. The calling came to me to get involved in politics, to make sure that people get what they deserve. So, I am committed to a democratic governance. That's number one. I am committed to caring for all the people. It doesn't matter what party you belong to. It doesn't matter what tribe you belong to. If you are a Zimbabwean, I care for you as president. I also know that to be a good leader, I got to be honest. I got to have that integrity and make sure that what I say as head of state is fair and just for everybody. Listen, I can tell you this, I don't only answer to the constitution of the land, I also answer to my creator. So as a servant leader, I believe that I'm serving God through serving the people of Zimbabwe. Finally, do you know, Kudzai, I've never lost an election in Zimbabwe, so I am the most ideal leader that the country has for 2023.
All right, thank you very much. Those are interesting statistics.
Again, you have to first of all decide why you want to be involved. If you want to be involved because the one side believes in democracy, the other side believes in another ideology, and you want to support the democratic side, that may be your choice. But at the end of the day, supporting warring countries needs to be, it's a decision made by Parliament, and we have to decide as government whether we want to get involved or not. Because you don't want to abuse the military, the Zimbabwe military. No, these are human beings who are committed to serving the nation, not to serve the world as such. Especially when they are not remunerated at all. It's all right to be a mercenary. It's all right to be a mercenary, but not to send a national army and not pay them as you promised. That is wrong. We don't want to abuse the military. Military is an important unit that we need to respect, that we need to protect, that we need to treat fairly in all regards.
So how do you feel about China's influence in the region, and more importantly, their economic hold in this country?
This question is very complex. You talked earlier about opening Zimbabwe for business. Well, I guess this government invited people from outside to come in, and the Chinese came in. They came in full time, and they are all over. And also, this country believes that the Chinese helped us in the liberation war. And my question is, how much do we owe the Chinese people to the point where they've been free to mine minerals from this country for 40 years? How much do we owe them? So that question needs to be addressed. When you are friends with people, when people help you, like Tanzania helped us, Zambia helped us, even South Africa helped, Mozambique helped us, but what are we extending to them in return? Nothing. But when it comes to the Chinese, we say, come and get whatever you want. I think that's an overextension of friendship. I noticed that the Chinese, quote unquote, offered to build us a parliament building and in Mount Hampton right now. And I said, that was in the middle of the COVID. And they're building a parliament building, not a hospital. That's because the Chinese do whatever they want to do in Zimbabwe. The government doesn't seem to have a say on what the Chinese can do or cannot do. Not too long ago, we heard that in Mutoko, the Chinese found some kind of area where they wanted to mine something or to take rocks or whatever. And they moved the traditional people there they said, go somewhere, just leave this place to us. And I'm saying, is this what it means to be free, to be an independent country? That you uproot citizens, you uproot residents for the sake of business or for the sake of our friendship with the Chinese. I think, the Chinese are very hardworking people, but the Chinese will take whatever they can take. Our foreign policy is very clear that whoever we interact with, it should be win-win, not win-lose. We want a win-win situation with whoever we have a working relationship with as governments.
When you're working for the people, it's easy to make good decisions like that. How would you handle the embassies, and what would your orders be to the ambassadors?
First of all, the purpose of an embassy is to provide an island where your citizens who are in that country can go when they're in trouble or whatever they want. That is their home. That is their home away from home. And so, in the case of Ukraine or even Russia, the Zimbabweans would rush to the embassy and say, "What do we do?" And the respective countries will tell them what to do. Some of them, I know that in Ukraine, we had some people in Ukraine, students in Ukraine, who were evacuated and they were sent back to Zimbabwe. That is one arrangement. And I think the same would have applied in Russia. But the main thing is with an embassy, with the Zimbabwe embassies all over the world, is that I understand that the ambassadors are hardly paid, and they are really starving, and they live a miserable life and so forth. That defeats the purpose. If the embassies are doing their job, they should also facilitate, for example, voters, Zimbabweans who are in Ukraine and in Russia and all over the world. If they want to vote when we have our national elections in 2023, they should go to the embassy and submit their ballots there, and then the embassies will send in the ballots to ZEC here in Zimbabwe. But they don't do like that. So in other words, our embassies all over the world are not doing what embassies are intended to do, namely to provide a home away from home to the citizens.
All right. A large part of the UANC's core values are human rights and civil liberties. With gender diversity situations growing internationally, how will the country under your leadership deal with this rapidly changing landscape?
Right. Let me refer to address the aspect of your question that deals with labeling, signages, and so forth and so on. By way of kind of, maybe this is funny, I don't know, but when I went to Epworth the other day, and I asked for the toilets, and the custodian there showed me a toilet where it was labeled boys, the other one was labeled girls, but this was a public facility. So I said, where are the men's and the women's? And they said, the boys is for everybody, and the girls is for everybody who is female. So I'm saying this to say that some people, they just put up signs which really don't mean much. Because in the case of a person who identifies themselves as neither a boy or a girl, where do they go? For example, there are some people now, here and there, you find some people who don't regard themselves as male or female. They're in the middle. In that case, what toilet do they use? That's kind of funny. But I think signages are important of people's culture. In Zimbabwe, we still have just the men's and the women's. And interestingly enough, I don't know why these are always in English in a Shona-speaking context. Why don't they put varume and vakadzi? Why don't they do that? No, they just have men and boys and girls. Not everybody's a boy, not everybody's a girl, but they don't put much thought to it, and I don't think the government should be in a position to legislate how you put up these signs. It's just common sense from a community, from leadership, to say what makes sense in their area.
Do you think that there's a lesson that other countries could learn from how we've handled our citizens and firearms?
Well, actually, I want to say that it seems to me that because of our respect for human life, traditionally, it's just a no-no to shed blood for any reason. And so, of late in this country, I have seen incidences where soldiers in uniform actually are performing robberies, using guns to threaten their victims and so forth. I've heard of policemen doing the same thing. I've also heard of several stabbings, and so this country is now drifting more into disrespect for human life. In traditional religion, and I know this very well, in traditional religion, shedding human blood is just a no-no. But this country is letting these things go, again, because there's no rule of law really, and some parties in this country are actually encouraging violence as a way to get what you want. I think we are drifting away from our Africanness. Our African culture was known for being one that respects human life. And so if we maintained that respect for human life, I can tell you that we might have something to teach other nations that we don't. I often wonder, why do people in the middle of, London, why do they carry guns? Why do the policemen carry guns in the middle of Washington, D.C., in the middle of Paris? Why do they carry guns in the middle of Harare? Well, there are no animals here. They are only human beings. So I would like my country to drift towards the direction of just not use guns to control human beings. We should use other means other than the gun, because the gun is intended to kill.
Okay, we're going to kind of get away from the super political questions, but not too far away. So where and when were you born?
I was born after the Second World War, and I was born in Makoni district. My chief is Makoni, who's ruling now. That's in near Rusape. But I grew up mainly in Murewa in my primary school days.
How would you describe your upbringing?
I think I have a very interesting story to share with you. When I was about 5 years old, 6 years old, I was assigned to be my grandmother's guide because my grandmother was blind. So wherever she wanted to go, I would lead her. I was not in school yet. That was all I had to do, to lead my grandmother. And so when we were sitting down, grandmother would tell me everything that I needed to know, everything that was to hear about being a human being. So I have a deep sense of my culture, which I learned not in school, but from my grandmother. That I am so proud of that, because what she taught me then is still good today. For example, she told me, even though I was just 6 years old, she said, boy, call me boy. She said, boy, when you get ready to marry, don't look at the woman's beautiful face and fall for that. She said, even if a woman is just a one-eyed woman, if her heart is good, then you got a good wife. You know, that kind of a lesson. If people would kind of hear what that means, a lot of people would really kind of learn from that and have some stable relationships. But that's just an example of why she would tell me that when I was just 6 years old. But of course, with the time, I got to shop around, and it was time to find me a bride. I took that into consideration. The other thing she told me was that, son, so she says, boy, never, if you see a person who is hungry, you have had your meal, you should always sacrifice whatever you have in front of you and give that person. Because if that person was to die in your yard because of starvation, you can never explain that even to your Creator, because you are supposed to share. Do all you can to save a life. So that was a big lesson on generosity, on sacrifice, and feeding the hungry. So earlier on you talked about widows and orphans. God, I learned my lesson then that we should always do the best we can for the needy.
My next question was going to be, what do you have to say to the youth of Zimbabwe? But I'm assuming that the lessons that you learned are what you would say. So if you had something to add to what you've already said, what would you say to the youth?
To the youth of Zimbabwe, I would say, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you are very lucky that you are where you are at this point in time, especially in view of my imminent presidency, because I'm going to make sure that you have all the opportunities that young people are entitled to, namely education. So we are going to have a free education in Zimbabwe. Free, not cheap, but free education, because the government has a lot of resources by way of minerals to fund your education adequately. So you're going to have exposure to the computer in grade 1. You're going to have exposure to all these sophisticated things And so that growing up, you connect with the rest of the global society via media and technology and so on. So take advantage of that. I also want to say to young people that always, when you decide what career you want to pursue in life, always keep your ear open, keep your eyes open, but especially your mind. Keep your mind open to that silent voice that tells you who you really are and what you really should pursue in life. Don't pursue a career because everybody's doing it. You know, I hear young people saying, everybody at school is doing this. You are not everybody, you are somebody. So feel your identity, be honest to your identity, and contribute, because everybody created by God is special. You are created for a purpose. Pursue that. You can do that if you listen to the voice that tells you, who are you?
Okay. Speaking of the youth,
I think this was a good one.
Oh, I sometimes I do good. Sometimes we come up with good questions here on the protection of not only just the girl child, but and not necessarily just the orphan, but the child from abuse. How do you intend to increase awareness of this issue?
Yeah. Traditionally, the concept of child abuse in our culture is very limited. Growing up, I never heard of child abuse, okay? Because there was a thin line between disciplining a child and abusing a child. So, for example, growing up, I knew that if I did something that was not acceptable, my father would probably pull a belt and beat me up.
Good times.
And when he did that, I knew it was a blessing. It was a blessing because he was trying to make a man out of me. But then today, that might be described as child abuse. So, like I said, there's a thin line between child abuse and the discipline. The Bible says, spare the child, spare the rod.
Spare the rod and spoil the child. That's what it is.
Yeah, something like that. Because what that really says to me is that the parents have to be very careful on how they discipline the children. Beating up is not the best way. Actually, looking back, I think sitting down with your child and explaining what they've done wrong and what the consequences could be, and also if they do something good, sit down with them and tell them how important what they've done is, so that they begin to have a sense of pride in doing good, and know that if they do something that is not so hard, it doesn't help much, you know. So everybody wants to feel good. So I think one way to raise children in this day and age is to be cognizant of the fact that beating up or punishing the child by way of you skip 2 meals or whatever. That's not the best way. There are better ways to do things. So that's what I would suggest to parents who are raising children. Another way is to make parents aware of the fact that when a child seems to have some special problems, it may not be of their choice. It may be that they have other issues. Try to really understand what their issues are. Maybe you can help. Maybe it's beyond your help. And if it's beyond your help, you go to counselors, you go to professionals to give assistance to the child. I think those are ways to consider dealing with this whole idea of child abuse.
Okay, all right. So what charity or causes are you most passionate about, like both internationally and locally? Or if they're one and the same, that's fine.
The UANC, for example, has a couple of involvements in charitable organizations. We have one of our members of the NEC as she runs a company that supplies, that gives food supplies to the needy. And there's another person who is also a member in our committee who runs an orphanage, and of course is trying to make a home for those people. And so we already have that sense of caring for the needy within our leadership group. And of course, when we get in government, I would see that these charitable organizations are well funded, and not just these, but others like it, so that it becomes a national concern to take care of the needy. Charitable organizations are good because, as I said earlier, they try to create a home environment, a brother-sister relationship, or a son and a daughter and a parent relationship, even though these are not biologically related. So I encourage this very much, because that's where you teach people the good culture, good behavior, and so forth. So I value them very much.
Even before you decided that you were going to be trying to work to make the country a better place, before you really took up the mantle as you have recently, is there anything that you were always passionate about, any causes or anything like that you were passionate about, even before kind of the political thing came into
Yeah, I have always had a passion for family structures that nurture future citizens and officials in the country. Now, when I say that, it's because I really believe that the place where any citizen gets good orientation of what it is to be human, what it is to be a participant in a community, what it is to be a useful citizen, is family. If growing up in a situation where there's father and mother, and then hopefully even siblings, it trains you to relate to other human beings, trains you to respect authority, trains you to share with your sibling, trains you to be, to relate to other people, and trains you to be sacrificial in many situations. So the family unit is the most important thing that God created for us to nurture ourselves in. A lot of people think that you go to church to learn this, you go to a club to learn this. Fine, but the first place is the family. So on that note, I would want to say that I feel very saddened by people who, husband and wife, who raise children, and when these children are between 10 and 25, thereabout, then the parents divorce. And by divorcing, they don't realize that they are destroying all these lives that had looked up to them as models, as role models. And when parents fight, and to the point where they say we cannot live together, it's impossible to live together, what message are they giving to these children? Sociologists tell us that in most cases, children who are raised and the parents divorce, those children growing up are going to think that divorcing is the best way to solve matters. And yet it's because the parents have set that kind of an example. What happened to the spirit of sacrifice? If you don't like your spouse so much, you have had children with the spouse, and now you get to a point of not liking them so much, why don't you find a way to live with that as an inconvenience, but you live with it, not only for your sake, but for the sake of the children growing up, so they see a good model. But these days you hear some counselors actually telling you, well, if you can't take it, just leave it. That's really a defeatist attitude that we don't espouse. I like to encourage parents to take their time to try to be tolerant enough in a situation. And I always ask myself, if you found a young lady that you loved so much, or a young man that you loved so much, how is it that after 20 years, after 30 years, you think that this is the worst person that you can ever meet in the world? How is that? Isn't it that it's time to adjust? Anyway, that may not be the most relevant topic right now, but we are talking about the best environment in which to raise children, and I believe family is.
Okay.
So my government would really develop a policy of affordable housing, because I don't want I discourage raising children in places or in homes where you are always moved, or you are always told by the landlord to get out of there because they have failed to pay rent. Now I want families to have their own homes, so children have a sense of home, a sense of ownership, and a sense of stability, and a sense of pride. And that is also, by the way, nation wealth creation, because when the parents die, they leave the house to their children, and so on. So if you are always a tenant, what are you gonna leave for your children? Nothing.
Yeah. So how do you see the future of Zimbabwe?
The future of Zimbabwe is bright. This is the best question of the day. The future of Zimbabwe is bright. Not just because I will be the president, but because I will be the president of a country that really has all the potential to be great. Our minerals, our agriculture, our manufacturing, our tourism, all these industries are really ready to make Zimbabwe great again. Sounds like I'm borrowing from somebody, but no, make it great again, because there was a time when Zimbabwe was the to go to country in the SADC area anyway. So, but now Zimbabwe is the country to run away from. Now that has to be reversed. My leadership will reverse that.
So, that being said, given, I guess, in the view of the UANC, if the UANC were to receive a negative result in the election, how will you continue to affect Zimbabwe in such a positive way? So without the obviously you don't have the title and the things that come with it. How do you intend to continue to support this country without the, as some might say, the limelight? Yeah.
Right. I like that question, but my response is unfortunately, my response does not kind of respond to what you're saying. The purpose of running for election, running for president, is to win. So I'm not thinking, what if I don't win? I'm thinking that when I win, this is what I'm going to do, bam, bam, bam. So I cannot answer the question the way you're asking it, but I felt like you should know that I am in this race to win, and whatever we are teaching people now, of course, will remain with them. If we teach people to be between now and 2023, we are telling people what kind of a government we will be, what kind of values we espouse, and so forth. So these things will remain with them. So I think the question might be, in your campaign, what do you think you are giving to the nation that they can remain with, that they can work with in the future? That has nothing to do with whether I don't become the president or I become the president. Because whatever they learn now, if it is good, it's going to work either way.
Either way. All right. You named it nice either way. All right. Well, that's the end of my questions for you and some of the questions that people kind of sent in. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and have a chat with me. I know you got a busy day. Yes. So that's it. Is there anything else? Maybe like a last message you want to shoot out?
Yes. I'm glad you gave me this opportunity to visit with you and also to share with you what I see, what I envisage as the next president of this country.
And exercise this morning.
But more importantly, I want to say to the people of Zimbabwe, all those hearing my voice at this time, I want to say that this is the time, this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us be thoughtful and let us be productive and let us definitely consider voting for Muzorewa for president 2023, because my belief is that what I have to offer the nation has never been offered before. What I have to offer the nation is something that the nation will benefit from. What I have to offer the nation, the leadership I intend to offer the nation is the leadership that is second to none. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it.